So, hi Melvin. I think we
Hello.
are on. I think we are recorded.
Record.
Yes.
Check from my end. Yeah, looks like it.
Welcome on this wonderful, at my end, sunny Sunday morning. At your end in Sheffield, I guess it's a little bit. Oh, there's a bit of sun, I see.
It's well, no, that's the lights. It's in my room. It's English, typical English drizzle.
Okay.
Comforting. It's good to be in.
I'm really looking forward we can meet and in depth in one of our many talks we have over the last year and explores on some of the topics which are keen and dear to our heart. In this series, it's a new series for Parallax Media that is called Rooted. Well, the word roots is very important and lived in the title. And I am looking forward and I'm very thankful for that chance to Parallax Media, to Tom, Mark and Andrew Sweeney for offering us this space so we can explore on topics and meet a lot of interesting people. So I'm thrilled to start with you this series on something I think I haven't talked with anyone as much as with you on this topic over the last year.
I think me as well.
And needless to say, I just want to toss this in before we introduce each other a little bit. We do have a very special friendship, not just working together also under high pressure, but also being these two people living sometimes close by, because you're sometimes here and sometimes in England, dancing in the night from hillside to hillside and campfire to campfire, listening to the stars and the fire and the plants, and virtually seeing each other through the airline, 4 kilometers, I think it is, from hillside to hillside, here in southern Black Forest near Basel. And so when I speak about you, I always have an inner smile of the man dancing at nighttime around the fireplace. But we have met the last couple of meetings, I guess, at my horse farm, in my camper van, in the forests, walking with our dogs at two magical places, in the kitchen, of course, and in the whole lot of being both, having been, and you being very engaged in a young startup in the Black Forest as current chef of the kitchen and trainer of the youngsters there starting a career. So
it's amazing.
there's a lot of stuff we can tap into. But just for the people listening to this, maybe we start at the very beginning. And there's one word which I feel pops up almost constantly when you and I engage, which is soul, right? Enlivenment, enlivenment of thinking, and the quality of soul shining forth and coming in as a so needed element in this mechanical world of crisis. So maybe let's start there with your background in. I know this is also new in Parallax, that we will bring in more from anthroposophy and the Gebserian understanding of integral, which is a little bit different than the Wilberian one. And I know we both have a history in both of the worlds. So
yes,
how did you come across? I mean, this is something quite seldom that I meet a person who has these same lineages. Dear to
me.
Yeah. So
isn't it just amazing to be able to talk in frame conversations with both of those amazing sets of ideas and insights?
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's just really
awesome. Sorry, yeah. I suppose my story, I was just trying to think how I can say it. It kind of almost speaks to that, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born and bred into the Steiner world. Kind of no choice there, or maybe I chose it before I came, which is another view worth considering. And so my grandfather, both my parents, lifelong anthroposophists, and grew up in a Steiner school from kindergarten up until when I left, which was class 11, just before the end. And I came out of that with a really deeply contrastingly mixed set of experiences. And at the time, it felt more like disappointment, anger, even bitterness, disillusionment. And yet at the same time, especially through my parents and through other people, individuals, a sense that there's something really amazing there too. And they don't teach you Steiner at Steiner schools. And I first read a book, my mum put it in my hands when I was 19, trying to understand the whole set of difficulties that I've been going through. And the first sentence he said in there was basically, please don't take anything I say as truth. I want to point you towards it, and you need to verify it with your own experience. And that was like, my reaction was like, hang on a minute. First of all, I can listen to that guy. And secondly, that means that a lot of the truth claims that I've been subjected to as a child might not be true. And then this book is it's a book I know you know very well, Knowledge of the Higher Worlds. And it's a very powerful book.
You read that with 19, seriously?
I read that at 19, but you know, I got...
Okay.
That was what my mum chose for me. And it was a good choice. And I remember so clearly being really attentive to it and getting to a point where he basically has two stages of the book, doesn't he? He has preparation and then the actual kind of how you do the esoteric trading, as he calls it. And I was so interested in all that he was saying in the preparation, and those ideas, even though I read it once, I don't know what, for a time when I was 19 and didn't pick it up till I was in my 30s, they stayed with me all my life, those insights. Like, you need to learn to distinguish the essential from the non-essential. And anyway, I'm going on to a bit of a sidetrack there.
Let me just add there something. Because I didn't think we talk about it, but I think it's funny, you know, me also being a Steiner. Well, my parents weren't that much anthroposophic, but for me it was a huge relief when I could finally leave the state school and change to the Steiner school. But then, funny enough, I also had this ambiguity like you. I had very torn feelings. You know, I could feel there is something there and there's knowledge, and I really wanted that knowledge, but I could also feel they're not really giving it out to me intellectually. I mean, they even said that, the teachers, you know, that we do all this crafting work and drawings and and movements as an experience, but not yet. They said we're not ready to understand intellectually what we're doing, so we have to wait. So this made me really angry. I got really angry, and I think I was a quite rebellious student, to the point where at year 10, I really said, I'm going to leave, you dumbhead. You know, I'm really fed up with you guys, and I'm going to go to the high school in Australia and do just the normal stuff. And I did really enjoy that year, because in that I had a fantastic high school in Sydney, and I could just learn everything. I could ask questions, and there was freedom in choosing subjects, you know, not feeling I'm so enforced by a plan which I didn't understand, because the school plan of the Steinerian education is quite specific. So I enjoyed that freedom. But funny enough, when I got back after a year, I had this really deep longing to go back to the school and finish year 12, because I knew this is like the crown year, right? And they wouldn't take me back in. You know, the teachers were like really saying, you left with a big drama. And my classmates said, you left with a big drama and you really made us feel this is terrible. So I had to really fight. They really tested me why I wanted to come back. And pretty much I was on my own in year 12. No one much talked to me anymore.
You know, I mean, that's quite similar to me. I almost got kicked out of school. And yeah, it all went to shambles at that point as well. It's so interesting, isn't it?
But then, because of that, I had like my Purvis private elite university, you know, my own little mind. I thought, okay, now in this year 12, I'm going to take everything out that I can to learn what this is about. And so I really enjoyed the theater, the art, and also the year project. I wrote my first little book, and I left school pretty at ease then with the school system of Steinerian, and kind of had processed my critic about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, the important point I want to carry forward from that is that it gave me a really strong need to understand. What is this world that I've come into?
Yeah.
Because I can feel the specialness.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me too.
Yeah.
And the points in that first part of the book are essentially about living with integrity. And what's interesting and relevant is that there's a point where he goes, now, when you start to think about going onto an esoteric path, an esoteric training, you need to kind of bear in mind all of what I've just said about being in integrity, and look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself seriously if you're ready for it. And I took a very quick look and decided no, and closed the book. And he basically says, if you don't think that's right for you, my advice is to take on as much as you can from this book and go and live with your life with as much integrity as you can. And that's it. And that's it. I was like, right then. And then that's when my integral journey started. So not that long after that, I somehow came across it for the first time, immediately sparked my interest. And then it led me both to some real world connections, just like with you. Took me to Hong Kong for a job with a chef who was really into it. And always there's the organizational challenges in the background. So that's that other theme. And integral really helped me to sift the baby from the bathwater with the whole Steiner anthroposophy thing. It helped me to understand a lot of the layers of BS and where but at the same time, I had this pervasive feeling that there's something Steiner's contributing that the integral world can't see, and that there's a limitation with the Wilberian approach that it's kind of, my summary of that is that it's so firmly rooted in the cognitive and with the, it's visible in the notion of trying to be a theory of everything, as, even just as a notion, that it kind of cannot escape from that view. And then when I came across Gebser, and it was really through Bonnita Roy's course, Magellan courses, that she ran through Facebook, that I started to see and understand a bit more about what that is and what Steiner's contribution is and how it's kind of unique in that regard, and how there's a deep compatibility at the same time between these two worlds that don't seem to have, there is some, but there's not that many connection points between them, which is surprising, seeing as Ken Wilber does cite Steiner as one of the three founders of integral consciousness, along with Gebser and Aurobindo. But then he doesn't take it any further than that, and you kind of get the impression that he regards him as magic mythic. And that's what I hear from a lot of people in the integral world when I try and bring in Steiner. Oh, it's a lot of magic mythic.
Yeah.
But with Gebser's understanding, you start to realize it's a kind of an octave higher. It's that involution. It's going back to those most basic aspects, but bringing them into our consciousness. So yes, it's magic mythic, but it's the kind of the turquoise magic mythic, not the without having gone through the journey of perspective and going beyond perspectives.
Wow, you said that beautifully. I mean, this is really interesting because, at the time when I started working for the anthroposophic magazine Info Dry, it was located in Frankfurt, and next to it was the Integral Academy, the DIA, it was called at that time. And also, by the way, Enlightened Next, the people from Andrew Cohen was all like in little houses next to each other. And they did this great thing that they did once a year, Autumn Academy, where they would all meet, not just the editors or publishers, but also the readers from the three magazines. And so that to me was amazing, like starting to work for an anthroposophic magazine and also writing on my book, Alchemy of Soul, which is, as you know, very closely connected to the higher world from Steiner. But there I met all these people where I thought, wow, there is an enlived, it was really enlived. There was dialogues, there was study groups, there was meetings, there was conferences, bringing all these people together. And yeah, similar than you, especially the integral then helped me understand the Steinerian approach in a much better way. Still jumping between the two, especially later I became head of media from Integral Forum. And I guess I'm not there anymore because I wasn't as faithful to just Wilbur, as keen and interested in my other projects as with Aaron Cheek or Jeremy Johnson, former presidents of the Gebser Society, and doing projects with them where suddenly this Gebserian link came in, which for me combined or opened the whole,
That's
suddenly
exactly,
it
yeah.
was making sense. Yeah. And that was just, I'd love to hear how you then approach Gebser, but for me it was really two things. One was so much how he describes nature,
Yeah.
how he's talking about the nocturnal quality and the primordial trust aspect, which really helped me to deal with a lot of challenges I had in my own spiritual process.
Mm.
But funny enough, I was invited to a poetry slam in Paris about Rilke. And I met Andrew Sweeney there, which is funny because he's now hosting Parallax together with Tom and me. But so Rilke was important. Poetry was important. The arts was important. The mood of the sky was important. And then these people like Aaron Cheek and Jeremy Johnson came and had written these books or texts or were speaking about the quality of integral in that sense. And finally, I felt I'm coming home. It's like...
I mean, I really resonate with that so deeply. And you said it really nicely then as well, because that's an illustration of what I mean by getting away from the theory. You're no longer rooting in the theory, because a lot of people look at Gebser and still look at the theory more than that qualitative essence that's underneath how the theory was formed. Mm-hmm. That's the important bit, and it's exactly the same with Steiner. Mm-hmm. If you go to his lectures and his esoteric conversations that were given to a specific audience in a specific context, you can find contradictions, you can cherry pick, and you can create all sorts of strange worlds. Whereas when you understand that it's actually an epistemological approach that Gebser did, Steiner kind of brings it back to Goethe, who pioneered this way of bringing the mind and the intuition together and kind of using our subjective experience of a reality as a scientific instrument, as valid as any other. And in order for that to be the case, you have to remove bias. It's science. So both of them advocate this really strong cultivation of self-awareness, but I love how Steiner puts it, awareness of who I am as a behaving personality. And that really points you to where the work is. Because to understand who you are as a behaving personality, you have to know what is the ideas behind the morality that drives you to do things a certain way. And so it's a whole journey, isn't it? And that's where the integral world helps to understand where ideas come from and how they can fit together. Yeah. So I forget where we were linking that to, but I think, just about the Gebserian contribution. It was transformational for me. I was talking to you before. I don't know if Bonnita Roy knows how transformative that little period of a few weeks of interaction in her little Facebook group called the Magellan Courses was.
You did tell me that at one point privately. Maybe we can just go a little bit into it. So what was it? What was that moment that really...
So, I mean, and I think I can link that to what you were just saying about the appreciation for the artistic. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one thing I was struck by immediately was how resonant and compatible Gebser's view of grand epochs was with Steiner's. So she described his dialectic epoch notion of, and the pre-dialectic and the post-dialectic, or the integral, and how each epoch has got an emergent phase, an efficient phase, and a deficient phase of whatever's being brought evolutionarily. And both of them regard the last epoch that we're kind of, in Gebser's framing, we're coming through the deficient phase and through the emergent phase of what's coming next, the integral, as he calls it. And what Bonnita Roy managed to express in that course in a very much so that you could apply it in an internalized, lived way was the way Gebser conceptualized the dialectic, the mental consciousness, and how we need to reconnect now with the pre-dialectic consciousness, which you can characterize as, he characterized it as a circle, I seem to remember she said, and the dialectic is more like a triangle that kind of breaks through the deficiency then of the pre-dialectic, which was getting stuck in circles. And in a way, we've had an epoch that's given us much more agency, and as Steiner would say, much more individuality in the world. But it's also cut us off. They both say it's cut us off from original, the spirit world. And so the task of this new integral consciousness, which Steiner calls living thinking, is to somehow reunite that dialectic, quite, you could also say maybe masculine, and with the much more intuitive, you could say feminine, but you could also frame it differently. But either way, it's those two very different modes of consciousness. And that's where the confusion comes in with the archaic aspects, and the kind of, where they're both very careful to say it's about re-enlivening those impulses, not going backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is in this process, right? There is almost like a pain, I would say. I did talk to Jeremy Johnson about it, and he said, yes, you know, this is the mutation pain. I wonder how you experienced that. And in my sense making, it was like suddenly there was a kind, because you said, you know, it's not that I lost contact to spirituality. I had been very spiritual, had very specific practices. But as Steiner always said and warns, you have to develop a lot of Ruhekraft, I don't know, tranquility.
Yeah.
And all these meditations, I chose to continue work to really find Ruhe, peace of mind in a world of turmoil, which never was to me the world out there primarily, but the world inside me as I went through different cycles in my own life, coming to the point, I think it was pretty much around 40, where I felt like I'm falling out that bubble where I trusted, where I was primordial safe, where I had a trust in existence. And I could see that in my brain I had reached a lot of experience also doing voice dialogue and psychoanalysis and all these things. But suddenly everything turned, how would you say it? It was like a moment of feeling I'm losing the complete identity of whatever I had built up so far. And I knew it was right. I knew it was meant to be. But I was so grateful at that moment for any practice I had internalized from Steiner to go through this. I think it was 2 or 3 years where, and that's when I wrote the book Soul Skin, because that was really a feeling of where is the safety point? Where's the reference point? I am everything, I am nothing. And that original inherent feeling of prayer or the Christian approach of God, you know, sometimes I think I told you before, in the middle of the night having an anxiety attack in this process of mutation, I thought, where's the phone number to that God, you know, to say, tell me someone what is going on. And the resilience and endurance, and this is the topic I think we share a lot, needed to stay calm in that and in trusting that it was just some kind of weird change in my brain. I cannot say it differently.
I very much, I mean, I can say I've become a completely different person.
But how did you feel that moment when it started happening? How would you describe it? I mean,
the way I describe what Bonnita Roy did is it's like she flicked me off the edge of the precipice with her little finger, and then that was the journey, and of like learning that it's okay to let go. Basically, it was a letting go of needing to know, needing to be certain, and most of all, in terms of my own story, a liberation from shoulds. Shoulds that you know you can imagine in the Steiner world, they're everywhere. And pick and mix, you know, is rich on that one, because there's this sense of mission, there's this sense of duty to spiritualize the world and to bring this life to the world, and anthroposophy is a great mission. And then when you read between the lines, you realize that that actually is then, there's quite an ego bit to that, of wanting to be a hero. And so it's a kind of, and the question, I don't remember it word for word, but the question Bonnita Roy posed to me at one point was so powerful. She said, can you live with the unsatisfaction? That was the word that really like nailed it in. Mm-hmm. Unsatisfaction of not knowing, not having a fight, not having a paradox, and also to take responsibility and you know, not even look to Steiner, to anyone, Gebser, for the answer, and just be fucking creative. And the day after that, digesting that, something happened that then led to a complete transformation. And it was the something that happened, I only was able to more and more understand it looking back on it. I mean, it was a moment of connection, but it was also both a letting go and a re-embracement of who I am. I remember like suddenly all my memories, a lot of memories came flooding back, but it's like I was rewriting the interpretation of all the things that happened to me.
Wow.
Especially the things that were, I saw as negative.
Yeah.
Things that I'd done wrong. Really powerful and transformative and emotive. I can feel it even just touching on it. It's like, and it's scary as fuck. There's nothing, but ironically, the kind of outcome somehow is this emerging deep level of trust. What Gebser called Urvertrauen, primal trust. And that I've sort of tried to focus on that in the decade since, to kind of stabilize into this, you know, and I fall off the feeling of connection and clarity at times, and slip into depression at times, or have done, and more and more feel like I now know what it is. And if I would have to put that in a sentence, it's my integrity is where it comes from. And if I lose that, it goes. That's the simplest way I could say it. So yeah, deep trust. And it's not a theoretical known, it's not come from a theory, it's come from experience.
Yeah, two things when you say that come to me. One is I take the easier one first. You can walk through a forest, right? And you take your dog, and it's just really just taking the dog for a piss. And you can walk through the same forest, and it opens up to you and it speaks to you. And that is how I felt in the world. And you make it even clearer to me that being in this world is probably a most existential, anxious kind of sensation. Taking it back to Tom and Andrew's talk last week about the matriarchy and bipolar women, as the female possibly appearing bipolar in many performances of it, because as being in intuition strongly rooted and being in a mechanical world is just bipolar. It is driving, it is an estrangement, right? A deadness and a coldness that you experience when you interact to a world that is not, in that sense, enlived. It might be enlived in the nature or in the soul quality of things, but then there's so much mechanism out there which just seems so hollow. And hearing you now, I think it's totally true. So what I did, or what probably everyone does, is building up all these concepts, even God as a rescue, as a hero, or as me finding explanations of how can I be safe in this world. And then when the soul is mature enough, then you can actually for the first time let go of all these concepts and then hold the threshold or the mutation moment of, as I think Steiner very clearly speaks about that. For example, in one of the 4 quests, is one is called the Vergessenheitstrunk, the drink of forgettingness. Yeah. It's one of the initiations towards enlightenment, and that one is very similar. You know, like he says, every night before you go to bed, take the drink of forgetfulness, which means forget everything and allow from the deeper and higher realms to be reminded of what is really essentially true. So even that small meditation is so powerful, because like now, we do a talk without taking notes, without having been prepared. We trust that things will be spoken that are in between us, and yet we both trust that there is no outcome, right? We don't know where this next sentence is going to take us. And that starts to be a magic feeling, to live amongst a few people, and nature especially, and sentient beings and animals who can take up the vibration of this. Yeah. But still being in the world and not excluding from it, and not retreating from it, and not escaping from it is it's a really hard, it needs so much willpower and love to, let's say, to return. Can I say that?
Yeah, remind yourself. Yeah.
And be at full service in that, like,
presence, as Gebser calls presence, and that's the kind of, I understand it as that kind of presence.
And that presence to me has, as you said, one aspect that is being creative, because every time you are being creative or being of the arts in some matter, you have to bring something to the world that hasn't been there before. You can't really copycat if you're doing something creative. And on the other hand, I feel, and also in our work together, in the startup company, which was under a lot of pressure, it was the pressure also which was good, right? Because the pressure requires that you go one step forward into the unknown.
You need to solve that issue,
and leave the comfort zone again and again. And that, the more you do it, the more you have the experience of that primordial trust supporting you or coming into appearance, right?
Very much. I mean, there's a couple of things.
The thing, Melvin, that's Michael thing there, because I think that is exactly what I mean, the Michael.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, so Steiner talks a lot about these, I suppose, archangels, and if one's uncomfortable with that, you could think of them as archetypes, but they are a bit more real than, say, well, I'm not saying the Jungian archetype's not real, but it's kind of, there's something contextual about it. And you could probably find Gebserian words that don't have to use that. But what Michael represents is, he's the spirit of time on the one hand, but I feel it's more the kind of time freedom that I see Jeremy Johnson talking a lot about from Gebser. And he's very much about integrative thinking. So you could say he's like the angel of integral as well. So there's two things that Steiner says a lot about Michael. One of them is that to connect to his consciousness, it comes when there's a confluence of more than two world views or points of view. So it comes when there is integration. And the second thing that I find even more sobering, if one entertains it and then you can start to feel into whether there's truth in it or not. That's how Steiner likes you to take his truth claims, not to just believe it. So entertaining the notion that Michael can only really then make use of what we're contributing when it's put into action, or he can only come to our aid when you act. So it's no good coming up with the theory and the vision and the dream and the idea, or even the insight and the wisdom. It's only when you start doing something with that you're connecting to that new what's trying to emerge. So it's something about action. I get that from Bernard Levergood. It's development, movement. It's the time element. And to link some of what you just said there to what I think Gebser's contribution is as well, on this question of the feminine, and I think there's a reflection there to what my experience with the way Integral struggles to receive Steiner, and I feel it's not so different with the metamodern. I love the metamodern, but I think it's also not quite ready yet to have that engagement with it, because it's not about just believing Steiner. And it's, anthroposophy, Sophia, Steiner, and I read recently this lecture where he says, the biggest inspiration for Goethe is the feminine, the divine feminine. That's the most powerful thing, and anthroposophy is, it's inspired by the feminine Sophia spirit. So it's almost no wonder that there's a bit of a clash there. But what Gebser is really trying to say is it's the reuniting of those two. So it's not one or the other. And so often I think on the anthroposophy, they stray a bit too much, like you experienced with your schooling. You know, yes, the art is all really important, but if it's just that and you haven't got the thinking, you know, they're not ready for the intellectual bit, well, in that case, you don't know what you're doing. But then on the other side, if you're like going headlong into finding the theory, whether it's integral or meta-modern, that kind of answers the questions of life, you're missing the fact that you're only really looking in one direction. And that's what I love about Steiner, is he then brings you to your feelings and most of all to your action. So you hold those three aspects: your thinking, your feeling, and how you relate to your thinking, and how they relate to your doing, and how that then feeds back, you know. So there's something about that reuniting of these very different things. You know, Gebser says that poetry is quite a good example of the nature of this emergent integral consciousness, this post-dialectic thinking. Because with poetry, you draw on both the artistic and the intuitive and the intellectual and the rational, and you can combine them into a very powerful expression. And obviously that goes for all the arts, and especially where art and science come together again. And maybe that's another way of framing it, of course. So there is, you know, it's a tension, and we're right in that stage of having to resolve that tension, and it's not easy. And at times we all make mistakes with that, and at times things go wrong, and of course that's where just being open to looking there is what redeems that. And that sounds so simple, but it's amazed me how much that's not done. You know, you think you're part of something good, so therefore you're good. No, you've got to keep checking if that's actually the case. And that's something that, again, I think Steiner's very strong on, but it amazes me again how I meet some people who've studied him all his life and don't seem to know any of that. And for me, it was the integral and my organizational development studies that led me to understand Steiner properly, if I want to put it in those terms.
And of course, I mean, I didn't mention it at the beginning, you have your artistic laboratory, you have your alchemy of cookery. And this is also how we met. I mean, immediately at work, you know, I picked you up from the airport to start your job at this startup as a chef of the kitchen, and immediately booked with the group arriving, but basically the same day then you arrived. A complete risk. I didn't know if it's going to work out. And I guess in the first couple of weeks or days, we didn't even have time to interact much personally, because we were both on full duty, full pressure, full on stage. Everything had to somehow work, but it was fun. I mean, it was devotional. We were both
enlivening,
and yes.
Yeah, very much.
And a whole lot of people being involved with it, which also I think, you know, we would have met in a study group somewhere in a retreat. Yeah, blah, blah, nice. Hey, Melvin, you're fantastic. But here we are, and develop this kind of friendship under highest pressure, and bearing witness also to our failures or moments of crisis within the pressure. And yet the moments of glory also, like when this amazing thing happens, that everything, like in the kitchen, I love this metaphor, because in the kitchen, when all the ingredients are right and it tastes super, and the right people and the right chemistry creates the food, it's so sustaining, right? And then the others out there are happy. And it's
a great example, because, you know, there's so much method to cooking. You can't ignore method, but at the same time, it's not just method. You can't just get a recipe and follow it and know it's going to work. There's so many other ingredients. So I think that's a great example. It's that art science. But you were on a flow then of like our meeting, so I'll let you carry on.
No, I just wanted to add a little bit about this cookery, because do you think you will go and train now more? I mean, you have started training youngsters. You come from the Jamie Oliver the trainer school, and I see how your work is fantastic, and I can also, as much as I bear witness, you have jobs all over the place now. So So how would it be, you know, if more people, what would it need? Or what is your experience as a chef and trainer chef? What do you require from people wanting to study with you to really, you know, like you just, I think you have this one trainee right now, which is an incredible experience, but are you planning to do more of that?
Yes, I mean, I think much like the way you framed this conversation, I'm quite organic, but I'm very much open to that, and I can definitely say it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of this year that I've been doing is working with this young man who, and to answer that question of what is it that, you know, because I could say if you asked me to think of your ideal apprentice for this program, what would their characteristics be? I can now just say, well, there it is, there he is. And the word for it is attitude. The simple word for it. He loves cooking, he wants to learn, and he constantly wants to improve what he does. And he's present and he's attentive. I mean, what more can you ask? But what I'm also finding, and I saw a little quote by, I think it was Marco Pierre White, one of these great chefs, that basically said that as well. It's like when you teach an apprentice, you're not just teaching them cooking, you're also teaching them your philosophy.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying that side of it. And it's a co-learning process. He teaches me too, a lot.
I mean, even if I may say, to draw an image, even when I saw you guys, you know, I mean, this is all specific mood. It's like early in the morning. You hop up so early, like most chefs do. But then you don't start the day just going pots and ingredients, but you take your walk and you're in nature and have the plants and they speak to you. And then I have, you know, slept up there in the place where you work and felt this morning feeling, you know, when you can start hearing the coffee machine going on, you feel the first beans, corridor. It has all this kind of a magic feeling. And then you come in the kitchen and the first scent comes out of maybe a soup being prepared, you know, or you wonder, oh, what we're having today. And then you hear the music, of course, because Melvin Jarman loves to have a very specific, fantastic Spotify list of great music. And then you hear laughter from the kitchen, and you hear a loud voice sometimes, which is, I think, very typical in the kitchen, but no insult. But you can feel this committed, concentrated. Come on, guys, now we have to be on spot. 12 o'clock, people arriving, group is sitting there, needs their food, and this all has a special feeling to it. Even though at night I saw you sometimes, then the staff from the kitchen having your last cigarette or glass of wine or beer out in the garden. Oh yeah, 5 more pots to do, but we're almost finished. And you know, no matter how stressy it was, for sure, I could sense this satisfaction between you. Something I really love bearing witness.
It's the most rewarding thing. I mean, I often say to Nikki, it's like that kind of attitude is almost like one of life's secrets. And no, you know, you have to learn it for yourself. But when you realize that working hard, you don't do it for your boss, and you don't even do it for the vision. You do it for yourself and your own sense of, is it respect? Is it dignity? Is it pride? Is it self-worth? I think self-worth is probably the best word I could choose out of those. And because you love doing things to a standard of quality. And for me, that's a really important aspect.
But that is, Melvin, because you have capacity. There's free space to deliver and devote yourself in that manner. I'm sure you've been a different person maybe 15 years ago working in Africa, Tokyo, wherever, where before the shift happened in you, you probably were that type of person trying to do it good, trying to do it 100%, trying to please the boss or the customers, the shoulds, exactly. And then now you seem to have, because of these experiences we're sharing, that the space inside you is so available for service.
Yes. That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. And that's where the resilience comes from. That's why I'm able to do it. There's one of my tunes, he goes, it's kind of funny how we keep on going like an Energizer bunny. And I love that line because I often look at myself and go, shit, I didn't know you could do that. But I do know that and I know from doing a bit of agency work here and there, that if I'm in an environment where I don't align with the dream and the vision and the way, it's the most draining thing in the world. The actual task is not that different, but it's the most draining thing in the world. Whereas what we've just described is the most energizing thing in the world. And that for me is regenerative. If you want to talk about regenerative culture, that is kind of what I see it as. And where you feel free to and compelled from your own source, your own volition, to give that level of 110%, but you're not doing it out of duty. And that's something I got from Bernard Levergood, who came after Steiner but studied his work, but it was also he's a Dutch national hero. He was an incredibly successful man. And he says, a rich inner life is essential if you're going to achieve any of this, putting these visions into reality. And within that, there are practices which become important. But he says the trap you have to be really careful with is you can't do it out of a sense of duty. And whether it's, or if you start thinking, am I being spiritual enough? Am I being pure enough? He says, then Lucifer's got you. Lucifer is one of Steiner's archetypal figures as well. But you could just say you're being pulled off the track of truth to yourself. So yes, somehow that freeing up, that letting go of what we really hold dear. I mean, I see this whole old mechanized consciousness that we're trying to grow out of, the deficiency. It's like a ring of power. And for me, what the linchpin, or one of the ways of seeing the linchpin, is that idea of certainty, having to know, and only when you're certain can you justify doing some pretty messed up things to other people, or just coercing someone. As a parent, only if you're certain can you be pretty hardcore with them. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be certain sometimes, or at least have a level of conviction that allows you to make a decision, but just to constantly be really mindful of how tentative any certainty is. And I don't mean a postmodern flatland of like there's no such thing as certainty, but what is it aligned to? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from, I don't know, some idea, maybe Marx, or maybe it's Ayn Rand, or whatever, that you not really thought about why they said what they said and how they came to see it, but you've taken it on and you apply it into your rationale for action. Then you're kind of a slave to that idea. And then you also have to, back to what you just brought up so beautifully, you have to measure yourself, and that clogs you up. You're constantly measuring, and you're diagnosing other people, you're diagnosing yourself. It's tiring, isn't it? But that's what I did. And yeah, to answer that question, I would have to admit to myself I'm quite resentful about doing all this work for some person who's not appreciating it. But there is a realness to that too. And I'm so mindful with this student that when somebody comes with that kind of attitude, you can abuse it so easily. And that's, again, with my organizational hat on, that's a really important point for me. So on the one hand, how do you encourage this life to come and thrive on your organization or in your organization? And how do you not kill it? Houseplants, it can be just a bit of overwatering, so every case is different. So how do you create a culture and a leadership approach that allows you to do that? I don't know the answer, but I think they're important questions.
I think this is exactly the perfect moment to lead into the course that you're going to give. And I'm happy if I can be a little bit part of it. For Parallax series, I think at the beginning of next year, we're going to have to be able to wrap that up, exploring these topics on organizational development from the rich carpet we have just covered, and in depth in some of the questions, and also maybe go through some exercises or experiences and sharings in the follow-up of the course, very much looking forward to speak with a whole lot of people coming in on that topic, but also hearing more about the organizational development as you have developed it through the Liver Good and Steinerian approach, but also your own mastery from university and so on. So I mean, we don't have to. You have studied some of this stuff profoundly, and yeah, you know, just maybe to finish this up, I do feel it's when you were speaking, I kept on having the imagery of the horses, and you have visited me in Alsace and saw the herd, and I guess I didn't stop telling you all these interactions.
No,
right?
I love it. It's amazing.
I mean, I can do this for hours. Just, you know, when we integrate new horses in the herd and all this interaction and the personalities. But when you work with horses and when you're amongst them and when you live amongst them, there's a very similar thing than what you just described in the kitchen. I mean, you can have techniques, and that's the problem. The horses are so innocent that they will react to good or bad techniques. Doesn't mean, though, that they are cooperative or devotional in a we space, like as if, yes, we're a team, we're doing this together. They can be so easily abused or pretend to be obedient just so that it's over quick enough, and they can go back to their freedom. And then, you know, this is what we research on our farm in Alsace, that these horses are so honored in their personality, as I guess you saw, and to spend time with the truthfulness of them also as a collective field and engagement with each other, you cannot but grow to be authentic and present, because at one point our horses now are so enlived in their true self, because they also get so much stability from their herd. We have, it's quite seldom we have foals together with mares and colts. And funny enough, all of our horses have built love affairs. So we have the 3 foals now, two girls and a boy. Then we have the youngsters who are like 3 or 4. There's always a colt and a mare being a pair, but they're all in one herd. And then they have friendships amongst each other. We have the wise old one, like the Mandrago, you know, you met him. And then, so we have all different ages. So to be around them and they feeling so relaxed in their own resource of having a field where they can completely relax and be engaged in their own natural enlivenment. If you enter that field as a human, you cannot reach them with technique. That is not authentic, right? You have to ask the right question, like in Passover. You have to come with the humble wish for true communication. And if you allow them to teach you in that manner, very, very soon it's experienced that it's similar than what you said in the kitchen. It requires from the human to be clear, have clarity. Doesn't mean serenity or always being on top and knowing everything, but being clear about how you transport yourself if you're around them, and being clear about what your approach is of why and what you want to spend time with them, right? So if you just want to go and pet them, what a lot of people do, and have a nice time, I don't think there's much need for them to have a human.
Yeah, what's in it for them?
So you really have to ask yourself the question. They got everything they want. They got the pastries, they've got water, they got the forest, they've got big land, they've got shelter, they've got each other. Why would you as a human matter to them? Why would they deliberately and by free will, devotionally want to spend time with you? And then what happens if that portal is open? And here's the magic is starting. So that's for another topic, another day. But just it reminded me when you spoke about the kitchen that there is a certain amount, there is a certain fragments to presence that can be full-on force-going. It can be appearing as directive. It can be self-leadership. I guess that's the word I was looking for. Self-leadership, navigation of one's own psyche and desires. and yet completely intertwined in the whole, in the others.
At service too, yeah.
And that is, I think, what makes life so meaningful and beautiful, if we wake up in the morning feeling sense making in that type of service, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a beautiful way of kind of putting it, and the, you know, what is it that you get when you're allowed to, or when you do the right things to encourage that connection with the horses. And it's, I mean, I don't really know. I don't have the experience with the horses, funnily enough. I mean, yes, I have the experience with you, but not to that level, right? But with a dog, I was just going to say, yeah, with my dog, we've talked about that journey a lot as well. So I can talk about that for sure, and it's very similar. Yeah, and he's quite, you know, you've met my dog. He's quite a force of nature. He's the beast, but he's so loving. But yeah, he's got these funny little moments here and there. But what do you get from it? It's like it's so is a language, but it is not a language of words. It's something. It's a communication. Like you say, you're getting to know who they are as a character, and he's definitely a character. They all are. And the beautiful thing with animals is that's the only way in. That's the only way in. That's the only language you can hope to really speak with them.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to see you change over the year now with him, you know?
With him, he's been one of my greatest teachers, still is, obviously. I mean, the best mindfulness trainer. And yeah, I always have spent a lot of time in nature, but now it's even more. And when you're there, as we both talked about, you know, those moments where you let your dog lead you are so special. And the way they tune into the moment. So, you know, back to this livingness, they connect, they tune into what's happening in the forest, and you see their ears perk up and they look over there. And with my dog and your dog, we have to be careful they don't go on a hunt suddenly, and you know, so you have to really read what's going on for them. And you have to also allow a bit of that, don't you? You have to feed that a little bit so they feel fulfilled in that need and desire to do whatever it is, whether it's catching a sheep or chasing a deer for 3 days.
or being taking their task as being territorial, too serious, and then attacking. I mean, I think I love our friendship with the dogs together. My girl and your bloke. I mean, and he really is quite an amazing experience, your dog. And we have to be careful when we meet, and we have to be really the foursome. We have to give them exactly the same amount of time than we have for each other, because it's 4 entities intertwining, and they have a lot to say, not just towards each other, but also towards us. You know, my movements have to change when your dog is around, because certain types of quick approaches to you might be scary or be interpreted as being frightful for you, for him. So we have to learn all these things about trust, or like a field that we create. And then my girl is sometimes just takes it too serious, that she wants to be the leader of whatever she thinks is her territory. So I have to teach her that she can relax, and that sometimes it's okay that another dog, or we just you know, define the space of safety. So it's a very interesting other topic. So yeah, let's do one day, one round on dogs and horses. But I think for today, and I ideally hope that we did record properly and that everything is there.
Still says recording. We had a false start, didn't we? But that's kind of so good.
Yeah, I just hope it transports well. And Melvin, it's always just such a joy.
It is.
We could go on, and we will. But for now, I let you run your dog, and I will go out with mine and have a little bit of sun this afternoon. It's my niece's 80th birthday today, so I'm going to Switzerland, seeing my family. And
oh, nice.
Yeah, I think 18 is wonderful when a young woman turns 18. So really looking forward to see her.
Lovely.
And you'll be around soon, I guess. In about 2 weeks, you will once again venture from Sheffield to Basel.
Such a cool area, so beautiful.
And we'll have some great walks and find some mystic mushrooms and places. And do a little bit of campfiring, right? If you get around the time. This.
Yeah, no, I will. I always make the time. I have to. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay, enjoy your day.
Thank you.